Alrighty, good morning, everyone. Welcome to a brand new webinar from Nimble and the team there on email security. And we're going to take a look at spotting some phishing scams and suspicious emails today. So first off, a really good question for you all is who decided that they wanted to enter the draw to win a Tesla? Well, if you were one of the lucky ones to scan that QR code on the earlier slide, you would have noted that it actually took you to a phishing website and did let you know, so you didn't have to submit any important information. But it's a really good example of when we should and should not trust, QR codes and emails and links and things like that. So in that specific example, I'm going to look at some red flags that would have told you that that particular QR code is malicious and probably not going to win you a Tesla. And one of the key ones surrounding that is that it's probably too good to be true. Teslas are really hard to get a hold of these days. You're on wait lists for 3 or 6 months. So if ever Nimble were giving out Teslas, or someone was giving out Teslas, chances are it's probably too good to be true. So we're going to have a look at some red flags and some other things that we can look out for when it comes to phishing emails and QR codes throughout this webinar. So have a quick look at the agenda before we jump in. And we do have time at the end for questions and answers. So please chuck those questions into the chat and we will definitely have a look at those at the end. Really important to do that so you don't forget them throughout the webinar. So we're going to have a look really quickly at what phishing is and the different types of phishing that exist out there. Phishing is a term that's thrown around quite a lot. So we're going to actually break it down into the different types of phishing that exist because there are multiple types of phishing. And we just want to make sure that everyone has an understanding of what to look out for and what types of phishing you might be targeted with. As I mentioned, we're going to have a look at those red flags and try and figure out what we might be looking for when an email lands in our inbox or a QR code is available to us, and what we do or do not need to look out for to ensure that we're scanning the correct QR codes or we're clicking on the links that we should be. We're then going to talk about this idea of verifying and then trusting. So we want to verify that something is legitimate and its authenticity before we trust that particular link or attachment or email is legitimate and before we trust it. We're then going to dive deep into the idea of attachments and what they might hold and the nasty bugs that they might have contained within them. And then have a look at links as well and some tools online that you might be able to utilize to actually check your links before you do. And so then that way you're a little bit more secure in painting the picture of what might be malicious or not. We're then going to have a quick look at how you can report phishing attacks and what resources are out there to support you in identifying and reporting some of these phishing and email scams that are out there. And as I mentioned, we'll have Q&A at the end, so please chuck your questions into the comment section and we'll get through those at the end. So let's have a look at this idea of phishing. Now, phishing obviously is a bit of a play on words. The idea that we hook someone into, giving us information or, divulging passwords or credit card informations with the way of putting out some bait. So the bait is, as you would think, on the hook, and we're trying to fish someone into, getting onto that hook and getting that information out of them. So phishing is a form of social engineering. So for those of you who might have attended our last webinar, we talked about social engineering really quickly, but social engineering is that idea that somebody could trick you into trusting them or trick you into thinking that they're legitimate and where they're from. We kind of see it on TV shows and in movies all the time. People will, be cool spy people and, go up and convince someone that they work for an organization or that, they're their, husband's best friend or whatever it might be, when actually they're not. And what they're doing is social engineering a particular victim into divulging information or providing that attacker with the information that they're looking for. So phishing is a form of social engineering and it's a scam where attackers deceive people into revealing sensitive information, such as your credit card information, your bank details, or your passwords, are generally the ones that we kind of see all the time, or installing malware or ransomware onto your laptop or devices. Now, again, if you attended our webinar last month, you'll know that malware is also commonly called a virus and will jump onto your computer and slow it down, try to steal information off it, or, also lock it down with a form of ransomware and ask you to cough up a fee in order to unlock your computer and all of your sort of content and information that exists on there. So really, we don't want malware or ransomware on our devices. So we want to avoid clicking on phishing links because we don't want to reveal that information, and we don't want that bad content on our computer either. So how does phishing generally take place? Well, generally we talk about phishing commonly through the delivery of emails. So, a lot of organizations will talk about phishing through a link on an email, and why you shouldn't click the link, or why you should check the email first before you do anything. Generally saying that, we have, these emails generally try to stipulate that your credentials are expired or your bill is due, and they generally have some urgency around them as well. So they're generally to, portray that they're from somewhere like Microsoft or Apple, or Netflix is a common one as well, an organization that you would trust or you would likely have an account with. There are actually a number of ways that a phishing attack can occur, and we're going to have a look at these in the next couple of slides. So let's take a quick look at the types of phishing that exist out there, because, as I said, phishing is kind of an umbrella term, and it's really encompassing of multiple different types of attacks that we see out there in the world. So email phishing, as we've already talked about, that email delivery that contains a malicious link or a malicious attachment, and we're going to dive deep into how we can identify red flags from that as well. Generally, email phishing is widespread. It's normally sent to a whole organization at once, or to a mass amount of people at once, because it's a kind of spray and pray tactic, meaning that they're trying to target a number of people in the hopes that maybe only 1 or 2% of those people might actually click on the link. So the more people they target, the chances are the more people they're going to have as a victim. Spear phishing is when an attacker will specifically target an individual or a person within an organization, generally someone who is known to possibly not have good security awareness, or might also have specific information that they're after. So think, finance people or HR people that might have specific access to an organization's databases or information stores. So spear phishing is when we target a specific individual. Now, it's a very common thing for these spear phishing attacks to not happen as often as the sort of spam email phishing, but generally we see more spear phishing against people who are more active on social media, such as LinkedIn and Twitter, because those profiles are a little bit more public than some of the other social media platforms, depending on how your settings are set up. Attackers will look to places like LinkedIn and Twitter to gain insight and information about an organization or about yourself as an individual, and then utilize that information to craft specific phishing attack that's specific to you. This kind of email or attack is not going to be, hey, your Netflix password is expired, or your Netflix bill is due, or your Stan account has expired, or anything like that. It's going to be more along the lines of something that's legitimate to you, something that's happened in the past, or something that's going to happen in the future, that they've done their research. And this takes more time, so that's why we don't see spear phishing as often. Whaling is when we do a form of spear phishing, but on a really big target. So we'll target whaling at CEOs or the C-suite executives within an organization, or maybe the chair of the board or board members. And it's called whaling because they generally have a lot of juicy information within their accounts. So you can consider the CEO of an organization, for example. They're going to have the keys to the kingdom. They're going to have financial information, HR information. They're going to have the latest strategic plans, maybe even access to all the credentials within an organization. But also, once you access or gain access to a CEO's account, you almost, if an attacker does it right and doesn't sort of trigger an alarm or an alert, they have the trust of the entire organization because they can become the CEO through their emails. So it's really scary to think that if you haven't got the right tools and information in place, you might actually not be receiving emails from your CEO. You might actually be receiving emails from a malicious actor pretending to be your CEO. And we don't just see it in CEOs, as I said, we see it in CIOs, so chief information officers, chief financial officers, operations officers, information security officers. The entire C-suite is sort of susceptible to this kind of phishing. We do see it on boards as well, although not so often the chair of the board or the board members are also, high value targets within an organization because they generally get, quarterly financial reports or might have access to the financial information of the organization on the fly as well. And so this information is really, confidential and important because it could, for example, if you're an ASX listed organization, affect the way that, your stock is being exchanged and the rate that it's being exchanged at. The next one's SMS phishing or schmishing. So we've all gotten these, I can guarantee it. Those pesky text messages that we get saying our, Ozpost has, not delivered our parcel, or, you're told your bill is overdue, or your MyGov account needs to be accessed, or whatever it might be. And we get those to our lovely phone devices, which is incredibly frustrating, but also it's still really important to look out for those and keep an eye on those as well. That's really common, especially in Australia. We're seeing a lot more scams with SMS-based phishing attacks. Specifically around toll booths. So if you're not from Perth, you won't know that in Perth we don't have any toll booths, lucky for us. But also, according to these particular scammers that are trying to scam me, I also owe them thousands of dollars worth of unpaid toll fines. So I don't know how that's happened. Apparently, I've been driving through a toll booth that doesn't exist here in Perth. But for those of you who might be in the eastern states or travel to the eastern states often, there are toll booths over there. So it's a really, prominent scam, really big in the US as well, actually. Another big one that we're seeing recently in SMS phishing and scams is the hi mum or hi dad scam. And this is where a attacker will reach out to you from a new mobile phone number and say, hi mum or hi dad, depending on, what they decide to choose at the time. I've lost my phone. Here's my new number. Can you save it for me? And then might send a few text messages back and forward to gain that trust. And this is the start of the social engineering. This is they're gaining your trust. They're pretending to be someone then they're not, and this is social engineering. And then one day, out of the blue, it might be a week or a month later, they'll send you a text going, "Hi mum" or "Hi dad, I'm at Woolworths. My bank card's just declined. Can you transfer $100 into this account for me?" And they'll send you BSB and account details. And it might only be $100. It might be less. It might be 50. It might be 200. But it's such a small amount, and it's having such widespread success that they're actually earning millions of dollars a year off this scam alone, just by telling people that they're their their son or daughter. Very, very interesting scam, and it's why one of the reasons that we need to always make sure that we verify before we trust implicitly an individual claiming to be someone that they're not. Voice phishing is another very important one that we've probably all seen as well, but we don't really talk about it as phishing. We just talk about them as scams, more or less. So this is where someone will call you and they will pretend to be from somewhere that they're not, or there might be an automated voice at the other end of the line. So I'm sure you've all probably had the Amazon one where it says that your Amazon account's about to expire and you need to press 1 or 2 to renew it. You might have had the ones from the Australian Taxation Office stating that you've got a massive debt due to the Australian Taxation Office. And then you've probably all had the ones, people from overseas claiming to be from Microsoft or Apple or Google, claiming that your computer has malware or a virus on it and they need to get onto the computer. Long story short, just in case you didn't attend the webinar last month, Microsoft are never going to call you to say that your computer has malware on it. Your antivirus company or your malware, anti-malware company might, depending on what you're paying for. But if you're not paying for that service, no one's going to do that for free. It's too good to be true. And last but not least, which is the sort of example that we gave you on the first slide, is quishing or QR phishing. So this is becoming really more and more sort of prominent. We're going to have a look at an example of it later on. But since COVID kind of sort of changed the way the hospitality works, we're seeing more and more of these QR codes plastered onto benches and tables at restaurants and, all around, cities, because they're fantastic. You don't have to touch. You don't have to, you don't have to pick up a flyer. They're easy for someone to just scan the QR code and it sticks on the device that they've, been interacting with all day anyway. But where can these QR codes lead you? Well, the fact of the matter is they can lead you anywhere. They can lead you to a malicious site. They can lead you to, a malicious web page that might have some viruses in it or some malware in it. They might lead you to, a site that's telling you you've got to pay a bill. They can lead you anywhere on the internet. So it's really important to to verify that QR code and that authenticity of that QR code before we trust it. There's a really good example of this out of the US. So going back to the restaurants that use the QR codes for menus, a particular restaurant had their QR codes changed on a couple of outdoor tables where there wasn't much security or CCTV footage being recorded. So an attacker had changed the QR codes on these benches outside. They had then crafted a web page that looked identical to the web page of the actual restaurant that was doing the orders, including everything, the menu, the timings, the when breakfast finished and lunch started, that sort of thing, the payments, the drinks, everything. And they'd also crafted the credit card information. So you had to provide credit card information, obviously, to pay for your meal. And so they did that, and then they put it out there. And now this is quite a sophisticated attack. As I said, it requires a lot of setup, but they raked in lots of money because people would put their orders through these QR codes and submit their credit card information, and all of a sudden they'd have these extra bills. Now the attacker was smart. They set it up so that what it would do is it would take the information from the person and their order, and it would send it to the real website and make it seem like it was a legitimate order, so they would still get their food. Nobody ever was wrong. But then, a couple of days down the track, or, maybe even a couple of hours, depending on how fast they were, they'd see additional charges on their credit card that actually didn't exist from this attacker. So that's why we need to make sure in all of these cases, we are verifying the information and the situation first before we do anything with the links or the attachments or the codes that we have. All right, so given all that information, which is a lot, what are the red flags that we can look out for in all of these situations and to make sure that we don't fall victim to a phishing attack? Well, there's generally, sort of 6 or 7 key ones that we want to look out for. The first one is urgency. So in all of these situations, maybe not so much in the QR side of things, but definitely in the SMS or the phone calls, the emails, the whaling or the spear phishing, all of them generally have some sort of urgency about them. So they'll say your bill is overdue now. You must pay now, otherwise you'll have your account suspended right now. The people that call you from Microsoft say, if you don't, resolve this right now, you're going to have malware on your computer. So we need to get it off before it steals all your data. You don't want to lose your passport or credit card information, do you? There's urgency. They're trying to pressure you into making a decision without thinking it through. Humans are really good at making mistakes when we're under pressure, unless we've trained for a specific, high pressure environment or specific situation. So that's what we're trying to do today, and that's what we're trying to do, as Nimble is trying to do moving forward with all of our customers and as many people as we can, is try and train you for these high pressure situations where they're giving you this urgency. The next one is spelling and grammar. Now, this is the age-old tale of, poor spelling, poor grammar, because the people that are attacking you aren't necessarily English as a first language. This is becoming harder and harder to, use as a form of identifying a phishing email or an attack, because there's this. So we all know what ChatGPT is. So if you don't know, ChatGPT is an automated, artificial intelligence. Basically, you can type a prompt into ChatGPT and it will spit out an answer for you. Now, this answer will be different depending on who you are or the context you provided it. And it's an artificial intelligence. It's a text-based sort of generative AI. They now have a new version of that called Fraud GPT, which allows them to craft well-worded phishing emails and attacks that have no spelling or grammar errors. You can even specify whether you want the email to be in Australian English or American English or British English, whatever it might be. It's really cool from an AI perspective, but it's also really sort of dangerous from our perspective, because we now have lost one of those red flags and it's becoming harder and harder to utilize. It's quite funny. I was delivering a very similar training package to a client a month or so ago who Instead, it's going to flip, and it will become, emails that have poor spelling and grammar will be a sign that a human actually wrote them. And that will be a sign that the email is actually a good email to trust. We're not quite there yet, so don't rely on spelling and grammar, but also just still keep an eye out for it, because it can be a good indicator. If you're already got a couple of red flags and then you see the spelling and grammar, we're probably at a time where we can decide that's a phishing email. Generic greetings. So generally these people who are sort of doing phishing, the spam phishing that we talked about, where we're sending it out to hundreds of people at a time, they generally don't have access to your first and last name. They've just gotten an email address off, LinkedIn, Twitter. They might have got an email address out of a data breach that happened a few years or months ago. They might have gotten that information from, a number of sources, but they don't necessarily have your first and last name. So they'll use hello, sir, or hello, ma'am, or hello, or good morning, afternoon. They won't use your name. Sometimes they might also, try and utilize the name that's in your email address. So for example, my email address is Shaun Barnett. What they'll do is, even though that's my first and last name, they'll just put the word Shaun Barnett all as one word in the email and try and make me trust it a little bit more. Inconsistent links. We're going to have a look later on at how we can identify inconsistent links, but basically we want to look for links that say they're going to somewhere. So for example, they might be saying on the actual email itself, please click here, and the link is https://netflix.com/login. It looks like a really legitimate and trustworthy URL to go to. But in actual fact, if we had a look at where that hyperlink is actually sending us, it can actually send us somewhere else. So it might actually send us to a spam page, or a fraudulent page that looks exactly like Netflix but wants us to type in our email and password for Netflix. Suspicious attachments. We got to consider a number of things when we get an email, like where the sender is from and are we expecting this kind of email. But we need to look out for some key attachments. Things like PDFs, Excel documents, or HTML files can actually contain a lot of malicious code. And that malicious code can then be utilized to provide access to your computer from an attacker that might be even overseas. That remote access can then be utilized to take all the data off your computer, a scan of your passport or your driver's license saved in your pictures or your downloads. Really important to not do that, but that's the kind of sort of remote access that these people can get from a simple email attachment. And last but not least, as I've said a couple of times already, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. There's no prince overseas that's going to offer you $5,000 or $500,000 from a long lost cousin that is 5 generations ago. That's not going to happen. And if it was, would they be contacting you via email? And would they be using hello, sir, as their greeting? If they've actually tracked down your information and tracked down the family tree side of things, they're going to be using hello, dear Shaun Barnett, or whatever it might be, and from a quite prestigious organization, or an organization that you can find out some more information online about, not from a Gmail address, for example. So just take a second when you're scanning or clicking on a link or whatever it might be to think, is it too good to be true? Did I really win that lottery, or did I really win that Tesla? Because it probably is. Okay, so now that we have a number of red flags that we need to look out for, how do we verify all this information and then trust the email or the the text message or the phone call that we're receiving? So what do we want to verify? Well, we want to verify the sender. So A, is the email address that in the from section of your email from a legitimate email address? Is it if it's from a Gmail address that says, admin123@gmail.com, not a legitimate email address. If it's claiming to be from an organization such as Microsoft, we want to look out for, domains and emails that are, Microsoft@gmail.com or Microsoft support at live.com.au. These are not going to be legitimate emails, and we need to make sure that we're actually looking for the correct sender. And once you've identified that email address and that sender, are we expecting an email from them, or is this just a random out of the blue email that we weren't really expecting? If it's the second option, then start to raise some of those red flags. Who's it addressed to? Are you in the address section, or is it BCC'd or blind CC'd away Can you not see who it's currently addressed to? Some other things, not necessarily a real key indicator that's a phishing email, but this is starting to build the whole picture. Attachments. What attachments do we have in there? Is it an invoice that's claiming to be from a new organization that you've never heard of before, or an organization that might have not paid their bill recently and is now sending you an invoice for it? We need to paint the entire picture, as I've said. It's really important to do that, and just ask yourself, am I expecting this kind of email and this attachment? If you're not, then reach out for some help. And we'll have a look at that in the reporting section later on. Attachments are really tricky. What you can do is save the attachment to your computer first and then scan it with your antivirus rather than opening it straight through Outlook. Links we've kind of already talked about. We don't want to click on links until we've verified them. The way that we can verify links is by hovering over them. So if you hover over the link with your mouse, you'll actually be able to see in the bottom left corner of your screen where the link is actually sending you. That's the case on almost every single email client and every single browser, depending on whether you're using a desktop email client or one that's online. Both will provide you with a snapshot of where that link is sending you. So if, as we said earlier, we have that link of netflix.com/login, and you hover over that, and actually the link down the bottom says, no, this is going to fraud.com/steal my credentials, then it's not going to be as obvious as that. But if those two don't match, then we need to raise a red flag really quickly. That's a really good indicator that this email is not legitimate and is phishing. We need to talk about the contents and the claims. So remembering that if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Is your boss really going to email you from their Gmail account at 11 o'clock at night? We need to paint the entire picture. Are we seeing some really small indicators of phishing and actually together, when they're all joined together, it's one big picture of phishing and fraud? A really cool tool is VirusTotal. So VirusTotal is free to use. It's online. It's cool. Just jump onto Google and type in VirusTotal. The second tab along in VirusTotal is URL. So what you can do is copy and paste the URL that it's trying to send you to into VirusTotal, and it will tell you based off the intelligence of, I think there's probably about 95 different antivirus organizations that are providing information to VirusTotal. It will tell you whether McAfee, Norton, and all the other ones that have now escaped my mind. They'll tell you whether or not those antivirus softwares will provide you with a do not click on this link, as in we think it's malicious, or whether they say, yeah, it's safe. Really cool tool. And I've just skipped ahead, so we're going to go through. So yeah, hovering over links, as I mentioned, looking for spelling errors. So can anyone notice the 2 spelling errors in those domains below? So what's really key here is that I've used in my slide deck, I've used an R and an N together to make it look like an M. So that's actually RN Microsoft rather than Microsoft.com.au. And that's actually TEARNS.com.au, not Teams.com.au. So really quickly, again, remembering, generally in phishing, they're creating that urgency so that you don't look at the details. If you create that urgency and then put something like that in front of someone, the chances are they're going to click it because it looks, at a glance, it looks like Microsoft or it looks like Teams. VirusTotal, as I mentioned, feel free to utilize that tool. Free to use online. It's a fantastic tool. And for attachments, as I said, you can utilize your on-desktop, antivirus or malware to scan them. But it's also, as I've said this entire time, it's important to paint a whole picture. If we're seeing some really small flags of phishing, it's better to be safe than sorry. Don't open the attachment and seek some advice from someone who might be able to identify if it's phishing for you. In any case, when we talk about links in general, we want to avoid clicking on them full stop. Yes, they make our lives a lot easier in sending us directly to where we need to go. So you might get a legitimate email from your bank saying you need to update your credit card information for this direct debit that's been coming out, and your card's expired, and you get a new card, or update your address or whatever it might be, and they'll provide you a link to get there directly. However, get into the habit of just navigating there yourself. It might take a little bit longer. It might take another minute or two, but navigate yourself to that link. And once you get into that habit, we'll stop clicking links, we'll stop. Has anyone noticed that when MyGov contacts you officially, they don't give you a link? They just say, log into your MyGov account. It's kind of the way that we're moving into the future. We'll see more and more organizations remove that link from their emails and say, just log into your bank account, or log into your online portal, or your Netflix, or your Stan, or whatever it might be. And when it comes to QR codes, we want to avoid scanning QR codes that can be easily tampered with. So some of the newer QR codes at restaurants are actually under a resin, and that's a good indicator that they can't necessarily be tampered with. But QR codes that are sitting on the side of restaurants to say order your meal before you're seated, we don't really want to scan those QR codes because they can be easily tampered with if they're just a piece of paper or a piece of card. We also don't want to scan QR codes in public locations. This goes back to the old scams that used to be out there, where people used to give out free music on CDs and DVDs and USB sticks on the corners. I'm an up and coming artist. Can you listen to my music and give me some reviews? And actually, that would contain some malware in it as well. Very similar situation. You see QR codes slapped to the side of traffic light and light posts throughout the city. Don't scan them. Why do you need to? Okay, so now that we've done sort of all of that, let's have a look at some examples and some links that are actually phishing or may not be phishing. So we're going to do this true or false, very similar to the last webinar if you were here. So based on the email that's on the screen now, do we think true or false, is it a phishing email? So let's start painting the entire picture here. Okay, let's start by looking at the email. Who's it from? All right, so we see it's from Microsoft. Now, fun fact and tip, that word Microsoft can be set by anyone. You can set your name and your email address to Microsoft if you wanted to. But then we see it's Microsoft at emailrecords.com. All right, so anyone can set up an email at emailrecords.com. This person's just set it up with Microsoft. So what we really want to see is that Microsoft word after the @ symbol, because that's the domain, and that implies that Microsoft has authority to manage that email. In this case, I'm already immediate red flag, because Microsoft would never contact me from Microsoft at emailrecords.com. We can see it says to me, which means that your email client has, I suppose checked and made sure that that email is coming to you. Office 365, we see a logo there. That's not necessarily a massive red flag. A high severity alert has been triggered. Fish delivered due to tenant or user override. Well, already we're seeing there's no hello, or there's no greeting at all. It's just an alert. And we've got a severity high and a time, date, activity, and the details that don't really provide us with any information, and then a link. So the view alert details is the link. Again, we've got a generic sign off. Thank you, Office 365 team. So for me, the big indicator that this is a phishing email, because it is that Microsoft email address at the top, and also that we don't have any specific information about the alert or any other greetings or anything like that in there as well. All right, moving on to the next one. A Netflix email. True or false? Is this a phishing email? All right. So this one's a little bit harder. We don't actually, if we want to paint the whole picture, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, did you cancel your Netflix subscription? And if you didn't, then, okay, you need to ask some more questions. And is the best thing to do to click restart my membership straight away? Or do we want to perhaps just go and verify whether or not our Netflix account is still active? So again, there are a couple of small red flags here. We've got a generic greeting. We've got hello. And if Netflix was signing, you have a Netflix account, so Netflix would have access to your first and last name. Hello, we've let you know that, your membership has been canceled, and we canceled it effective the 21st of March in 2017. Now, this is the urgency. Now, it doesn't seem very urgent. They're not using an urgent tone or urgent language. They're just providing some urgency on your side, because if you're anything like me, I wouldn't want to, be around, to be at home without my Netflix account. It's something that I use probably every day. So it's creating that urgency from your side. Again, we've got the visit the help center links and the contact us, and also the restart your membership links. But really, we don't have enough information here to truly say whether this is a phishing email. It's really likely that it's a phishing email, but we need to ask ourselves that question first: is did we cancel our Netflix subscription? And if you didn't, just log into Netflix. Go and log into Netflix online, on your phone or even on your TV or whatever it might be. And if the account's still active, ignore the email. All right. Next one is an Outlook email. Is this a phishing email? Alrighty, so I've deliberately cut out the to and from emails in this one because it made it quite obvious. But yes, again, this is another phishing email. The giveaway here, or the giveaways, again, painting the whole picture, is we've got some inconsistency in grammar. We've got a generic sort of greeting as well, dear user, rather than dear your name, and then again, generic sign off at the bottom. If we hovered over the account.live.com link, it would likely send us to a different link that's not the Outlook Live account. So yeah, another phishing email. This one is one that hit us a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago. An authenticator update. Is Microsoft going to contact you to say your 2FA needs updating? No, they're not. It's another phishing email. Again, hello user. We've got some information about upgrading your Microsoft Authenticator app. If your Microsoft Authenticator app needs to be updated, it's going to be you're going to be told from your managed service provider, your IT service provider, not from Microsoft themselves. So now that we've had a look at all of that, how do we report a phishing scam? So report it to your IT service provider. So for those of you who are customers of Nimble, please report it to us. For those of you who have other service providers, report it to them through their means, and you can contact them to get information about how they would like phishing emails reported to them. If you'd like to report a scam or figure out if something is a scam, there's a really useful website that's managed by the Australian Cybersecurity Centre and the Australian government, which is ScamWatch. And they have all the information on the latest scams. So they did a big campaign around the latest iTunes gift card scam that happened a year or so ago. And so they're really up to date and have important information about the scams that are going around. If you have the option, depending on whether your Outlook email address is managed or not managed by an IT service provider, you may have the report phishing email in your Outlook or your other online sort of email accounts. If you've got a generic Outlook account or generic Gmail account, that will have a report phish button, and you can utilize that as well. Thank you very much. That concludes the information in today's webinar. As I said, just wrapping up as a whole, please always remember to question first and verify first before we trust. Don't just trust implicitly because it looks like it's a legitimate email, and paint the whole picture when it comes to your emails and your phone calls and SMSs. Alrighty, so we'll hand over to questions, queries, and any other information. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so that I can jump into the chat. All right, if we have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat. I can see there was a couple of people who were unfortunately caught out by the Tesla. I'm sorry. It was a really cool and fun sort of thing to do at the beginning. The first time that this actually happened, or the first time that Nimble did this, was at a conference that we attended a couple of weeks ago. And I almost fell for it as well because I really wanted a Tesla. And it took me a second to go, hang on, wait, this is too good to be true. Nimble as an organization doesn't even have Teslas, to use. So why are we giving away one for free? Alrighty. Well, it doesn't look like there's too many questions coming through. So, as always, everyone, feel free to reach out and connect through LinkedIn or flick me an email if you've got it. Please send the questions through via LinkedIn or via email if you think of any in the upcoming times. And please also keep an eye out. We'll be doing another webinar in a month or two, so keep an eye out for that. We'll be focusing on some a new topic which will be announced very shortly. Thanks, everyone.